Hey guys, what's up? So in this video we're going to look at how we can create our form using our model. In the previous video we created our form from scratch using Django form class. Now in this case we're going to recreate the same form that we created in the previous video using our database model. So the first thing I'm going to do is head over to forms.py and I'm going to comment the form we created in the previous video. Now simply recreate this form, so I'll create a class called the post creation form. And instead of inheriting from our form class, we're actually going to inherit from forms.models model form. So what a model form is a form that we actually create from a database model. So the first thing I'm going to do is to import our database model. So in this case, it's going to be from .models. We are going to import our post class, which is our database model. And now what we shall have to do is to just simply create a meta class. And this meta class is going to have the following attributes. So the first is going to be our model, which is going to be our post model. And the next is going to be the list of fields that you want to render on this model. So I'll just come and say fields is actually going to be a list. And this list will have strings, which are going to be the actual fields from our database model. So I'll open up our models.py and I'm going to just come right here. So we have a title, a content, and an author, as well as a thumbnail. So in this case, let's first render our title and our content. So I'll just come right in here, and all I'll have to do is to say title and then content. Now when I save this, I'm simply going to see our server, which is actually okay. So when you head over to our Chrome right here and head over to our create post view, so right now we see the only fields are our title as well as our content. Now let's go ahead and render all the fields on our database model. So the way we do that is by changing our fields variable right here from a list to a single danda variable. So in this case, it's going to be quotations or a string with danda all, meaning that you actually want to show all the fields on our database model. So when I go ahead and save this, I'll head over to our UI right here, and now we are going to have all the fields that you have on our database model. Now let's look at also how we can customize these fields, as we are going to add some stylings on them to make them look more appealing. So the way we do that is by specifying each field. So I'll start with the title, and this title is going to have it's going to actually be forms.char field, and what you shall do is to basically add a widget onto this form. So I'll just come and say that we shall have a widget, and this widget is going to specify which kind of widget this is actually going to have. So we're going to access this by forms, so it's going to be forms.text input, and then within this text input we shall specify the attributes. So the attributes are the different attributes that an input actually has, for example the class, the name, and the placeholder, and so on. So right in here we can come and specify our attributes. So we shall just simply provide a class, which is going to be our CSS selector we shall use for styling this, and I'll just give the class as form control. Now after doing this, I'm simply going to do the same for the rest of the fields. Now I'll copy this, and what I'll do is to provide the same thing for our content. So our content is going to be a little bit different because our content is a text area. Now instead of saying form.text input, in this case we are actually going to say form.text area, but the attributes will still remain the same. Now for our author, we shall have the same thing. So in this case, I'm just simply going to come and say that's going to be for our author. Now when I refresh, or when I save this and head over to our page right here, when I refresh, we actually see our styles are not yet applied. So if you want to apply the styles, what I can do is to head over to our CSS, and that's within our static folder and main.css. So what I'll do is to first add .form control, and what I'll do is to say that's going to have a width of 100%. So when I go ahead and save this, I'll head over to our browser right here, and when I refresh, in this case it's not going to work, but when I had refresh with Ctrl Shift and R, in this case we're actually going to have our styles applied, and our fields are going to be having a width of 100%. Now, since we have these a bit untidy, like we have our titles or our labels next to our fields, we can actually separate this and render them independently. So what we're going to render to do that is go to our template of creating a post. Now, each form is simply an iterable containing the various fields, so we can be able to loop through each one of them. Now, to do that, I'll simply come right here, and what I'll do is to create a for loop within our template, and this for loop is simply going to loop through each of the fields that our form is going to have. So what I'll do is to say for field in our form, for each field we shall create a form group. So I have image, so we can actually create a div with a class of form group by just saying .form group and in tab. Now once we have this, I am going to just simply come and provide the label. So I'll create a paragraph, and this paragraph is going to have a class of label. Now in this case we shall have the field label, so I'll use var to create the field label. In this case we shall have field dot label. When I save this, now when I refresh, we're actually going to have this. Now I'm also going to go ahead and provide the field itself, so I'll just come and say field, and this is going to actually go ahead and render the field. Now let's style up these forms. So I'll just simply come to our main.css, and all I have to do is to specify that our form actually have the styling for that. Now instead of having a margin of 20 pixels, I'm just simply going to change the margin to be auto, and then I'll give it a width of 50% just to make it be centered in our middle. So when I save this, I'm going to refresh, and this will be centered in our middle. I'm also going to go ahead and change this h1, so I'll simply add it within our form. And once we have this, then our form is going to be centered. Now let's go ahead and also style up our labels. So I'll just come within our main.css, and what I'll do is to say .label, since this is a selector we used. Now say we're going to have our labels having a margin top. Let's actually make it a margin top of 20 pixels. Now I'm just going to come and refresh, and now we see that our labels are actually having that margin. And we shall also style up our form controls, so we shall just basically specify our font sizes to be 20 pixels. And yeah, so we've added some simple CSS to our fields right now, and our field looks more meaningful. So now let's go ahead and look. Actually, let's first style our button here. So I'll just simply create a simple selector of a button. So we are going to remove the border from that button with border none. And after doing that, we shall provide a background color of black. We shall provide a cursor of pointer, and then we shall provide a color of white. So, and actually we shall also add a padding of, let's say, 15 pixels. So when I refresh, because we haven't actually selected our button, so I'll go right here, and I'll actually first change the value of this to submit, and then provide our class as btn. So when I save this, I'm going to add refresh, and now we have our button styled. I'll also add it into a form group. So this is actually going to be .form group, and I'll simply go ahead and save this. So when I refresh, now have our button styled, and it's in the same levels as this. So I'm actually going to add some margin top on our form groups. So I'll just simply do that by saying form group, and within each form group we shall have a margin top of, let's say, 10 pixels. Forgive my stylings. Yeah, so now we have our button right here. So one thing we're going to do is to go ahead and basically, actually one thing we can also do is to specify the number of rows, because now our text area is taking up a lot of space. So to do that, you can actually do it within our widget. So since this is a text area, I can just come and add some attribute in here. So I'll add another attribute. Let me close this for now. So since this is a text area, I'm also going to come and specify the attribute of calls, since it's a text area. And then let's say that this is actually going to be 5. Now when I refresh, When I save and refresh, we actually see no change because we specified our form control to be of width 100%. Now let's actually say that we want our rows, because so let's refresh. Actually, now our form text area is actually reduced in columns, and now we have it styled a little bit more differently. So let's go ahead and look at how we can go ahead and save our model form, or use our data or use data from this model form and save it to create a post instance. So the way we're going to do that is by heading over to our views. So I'm just going to go back to our views.py within our posts app. So in the previous video, we actually used the data from the request, which was a post request. But in this video, since we are using a model form, we can be able to use that form to create instances of our post, then go ahead and save that post. So what you shall need to check for is if the request method is equal to post, and all you shall need is to change this logic. So I'm going to remove this. And once we remove that, then I'll simply come, and what I'll do is to check for our post data and then make our form have that post data. So we're just simply going to create another instance of our post creation form, and in this case the instance of that data, actually the data that that form will be having, is going to be data that comes as a result of us sending a post request to our server. Now if actually this is actually going to be our form, sorry for that, and once we have this form, now we shall have to check for the attributes we checked for in the previous video. So we shall start with form.is valid, and once this form is valid, then we shall go ahead and save it. So I'll simply come and say form.save. So when you call form.save, we're actually saving the instance of the post that we've created from this model form. Now after doing that, then I'll simply uncomment this line, and this will actually redirect us to our post. So when you go ahead and save this, hoping that our server is running, I'm just simply going to come right here, and when I create a post, so the post I'm going to create is going to be land docker in a month of launches. Actually a good book I'm reading. So when I go and create the content, so I'll just say this is a good book on Docker, and then I'll provide the author. So I'll provide the author name and then choose a file. So I'll head over to my downloads and I'll select a simple PNG file. So when I select this, I'll go ahead and submit. Now our file, our post is actually created right here. So to verify whether it has been created, I'll head over to our admin. When I refresh, we see that our post has been created, but the only problem we have is our image is actually not uploaded. So what we've done is to simply create a form that basically creates our data but does not take in our files. So if we want our form to take in both our files as well as our data, what we shall need is to add an encoding type to our form. So the way to do that is by going back to our template right here, and then within our form I'm going to add one specific attribute, and that will be the enc type. Now we have different encoding types, but what we need is a multi-part stroke form data. Once we have that, then we are also going to go to our views.py, and we shall change our form instance to also include our files. I'm going to tidy this a little bit. Now once we have that, and I'll also come and specify that this form is actually going to also contain files, so we shall access the files via request.files. And once we have this, then we're going to go ahead and create another post. So I'll go back to create post, and once we are here, I'll simply create a simple post. I'll just say this is a sample post, and once I have the content right here, I'll just simply say this is sample content. And when I have this, I'll also create an author. So I'll just say the author is Django. I'll pick up the same file. So when I go to I'll actually go to our downloads. That's where the file was. So when I select the file and submit, now we see that our post has been created. Now let's verify that our image has actually been uploaded. So when you go to our post, which is this is a sample post, now we can see that our image has been uploaded. To upload our images. So what you're going to do is to create another view function that's going to allow us to update this post, as well as one that's going to allow us to get the detail of each post. So that I'm going to do that is by heading over to our views.py. Now I'm going to create two view functions. I'm going to create the first one, which is going to be for our post detail. So I'm just simply going to call it post detail. It's going to take in the request as well as the post ID. And what it will do is to simply return an HTML template. So shall take in a request as well as the HTML template. Now in this case, our HTML template is going to be post detail.html, and we shall also provide a context. Now I'm just simply going to leave this context as an empty dictionary for now. Now I'm going to go ahead and also create a simple view function that's going to allow us to update the post. So I'll just come and say that we shall have update post, and this is going to actually take in a request object as well as the post ID. Now once we have this, I'll also provide the context. Actually we're going to have the same thing as what we had, so I'll simply come right here and return render. Now in this case, we shall take in a request as well as a template. So in this case, our template is actually going to be update.html, and shall also have our context. Now once you have this, then I'm just simply going to create URLs for these two views. I'll head over to our urls.py and I'll simply create the path. So the first path is going to be for our post detail page. Now just simply call that /post/ our integer, which is going to be our post ID. And once we have that, then I'll simply also come right here and save views, and here we shall actually access the one for our post detail. And now I'm just simply going to give this a name, and that name is actually going to be our post detail. So after providing that, we're also going to create the one for updating. Now in this case, I'll just say post/update, and in this case we shall provide an integer, which is going to be our post ID. And what you shall have is to say views dot, in this case we shall access the one for updating a post, and now we shall have our name as update post. Now once we have this, then what I'm going to do is simply to go to our index.html page, and I create a link that's going to lead us to our post detail page. Now I'm going to go to our views and save, and then I'll head over to our index.html. Now each time we have a title, we're going to actually have an anchor tag that's going to redirect us to the detail page. So I'll remove our h1 right here, and then I'll create an anchor tag, and within here I'm simply going to create a URL. This URL is going to have a view function or a name of a URL pattern. So in this case, we shall have our post detail, and since this has an argument, now the way we provide that argument is going to be via post ID, and then we shall specify the value of that post ID. Now in this case, it's going to be post.id, the post we're actually going to provide within our context. Now after providing this, I'll head over to our views.py and then take care of that specific post that we're going to view the detail for. So I'll simply come right here and then say our post is actually going to be post.object. So we're going to query for that specific post from our database, and then we shall query for that post if the primary key is equal to the post ID. Now once we have that, all we have to do is to include it within our context. So we shall access it via post, and then we shall specify the value as that specific post. Now once we have this, I'm going to go ahead and go to our home page. So in a refresh, we now have different links that lead us to the different posts. So for example, if I clicked here, we actually see that our detail page does not exist. So I'll just simply come to our templates, Now create a new file which we're going to call post detail.html. So this post detail.html is going to have our HTML for that specific page. So I'll begin by extending that base.html file, and then I'll have a block. So this block is going to be block content and then in block content. So when I save this here, I'm just simply going to come and copy the HTML for this, and I'm just simply going to come and include it here. And what I'll do is to refresh. Now we have a detail page that actually takes us to where we have the details of that specific post. Now when you go back to our home page, we can be able to redirect to that specific post. Now I'm going to add a little styling onto that, so I'll come right here and I'll give this anchor tag a styling. So I'll just say class, and then I'll say that our class in this case is actually going to be our link. So when I refresh, I'm just simply going to come to our main.css and then select our link, and this link is actually going to have a color of, let's say, black, and a text decoration of none. So when I save this, I'm going to add refresh. So we're actually on our detail page. So when I go to our index.html right here, we actually have our links as black. I'm actually going to also change that on our detail page. So I'll go to post detail and now remove this anchor tag since we are not redirecting to anywhere. So now we have our simple detail page. So when you head over to our home page, you can be able to redirect to our detail page, which is working. Let's also create a link that's going to take us to our update page of each post. Now the way we're going to do that is by going to each of the post detail, and then we shall create an anchor tag. So I'll actually leave this anchor tag. I'll just give it a class of update link. So I'm actually going to call this update link, and I'm just going to come right here and say update. Now I shall also provide a URL. This URL is going to lead us to update post, and then we shall provide the post ID. So I'll just come right here and say that our post ID is actually going to be our post.id. And once you have this, then what I'm simply going to do is to head over to our post detail page. So we have this link that will take us to our template, but it doesn't actually exist. So when you go and create that template, I'm just simply going to create that template here in our templates folder. So I'll just come and create a new file, and I'll call it update.html. So update.html is actually going to have the same HTML as our post creation HTML. So I'll look for that create post template, and what I'll do is to simply copy this, and then I'll add it right in our update.html. But since we don't have a form defined in our context, now let's go ahead and work on that specific view. So I head over to our views.py, and what I'm going to first do is to query for the post that has that ID, the one that we want to update. So I'll begin by saying post to update. It's actually going to be post dot objects, then dot get. In this case, we want to get that post that has its primary key as the post ID. And once you have that, then you're going to create our form instance as our form containing the values of that specific post. Now the way we do that is by saying post is going to be post creation form, and what you shall have is our instance or our data, and our data in this case is actually going to be the post to update. Now we're going to provide this in our context, so I'm just simply going to come here, and what I'll do is to provide it as our form, and then I'll specify our form to be that specific form containing our post to update. So when I refresh, right now we have our form with the default values as those containing, actually we have our form containing the values of that specific post we want to update in this case. Now let's go ahead and look at how we can use this form to update our post. So what we need is to check out if our request.method is equal to post. So I'll just come and say if request.method is equal to post. In this case, what we need is our form with both the instance as well as the data coming from our request.post. So then we're going to do that is by saying form is actually going to be our post creation form. And in this case, what we need is the instance first. So our instance is actually going to be the instance of the post to update. And then after that, we shall also provide the request data that comes out of our post request. So I'll just come and say that we're going to have our request data, so that will actually be request.post. And then actually I forgot to add something here. It seems like I have an error, so let me actually provide this. So another thing is we are actually going to have request dot files, meaning the files that will come out of this request. So it seems like we're having an error. Let me actually see. So our form is actually going to have the files which we have specified as the files. Now we also have request.form. So we have our request.post, we have our instance. So in this case, what we need is going to be the instance, and the instance in this case is actually going to be our request. Actually, in this case, our instance is going to be our post to update, and we shall also need that data. So the data in this case is going to be our request dot post, and now we shall also need our files. So in this case, I'm going to come and say that our files is going to be request dot files, and what we need actually this is going to work. Forgive me, I'm somehow tired. So once we have that, then all we need to do is to check if this form is valid. Then we go ahead and save it. So let me tidy this up for you guys. So what I'll do is to come and say if form dot is, in this case we shall say if the form is valid, then we shall go ahead and save this form. So I'll just come and say form.save, and then we shall redirect to the appropriate page. So in this case, we shall return redirect, and what we shall do is to redirect to our post home. So I'm just simply going to come and say redirect to our post home, and when I save this, so we're now going to go ahead and redirect. So let's go ahead and test our form. So when you come right here and we change this, so let's say JavaScript for beginners. So when you go ahead and save this, we now have our title changed. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for our photo. So let's choose a file. So when I come right to I'll actually go to my downloads, and within my downloads I'll choose the land.png file. So when I submit, we actually redirected to our JavaScript for beginners. Now when we go right to our posts on our admin, so I'm actually going to go to JavaScript for beginners. Now we see that we actually have a new photo instead of our default.png. So that means we actually have our form working. In this video, we've been able to look at model forms and how we can use them to generate our form from our existing data model. Django model forms actually make our life easier, and we've been able to look at how we can use them to both create our posts as well as to update our posts. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like. Help this video spread to many beginners who are learning Django. And thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.